You've seen so much. We're talking over 1,000 murders
Yeah.
a year in Los Angeles. Especially the murder rate here has gone down. When you were working, it was probably way higher in the early 90s.
Every other day, they were finding a body. We would always say, my God, please, not another one.
MO is important in linking these cases. If you have a serial killer, start with what is a serial killer. It's something that is only known to the investigator and the killer. For the first 5 or 6 killings that were found along the river after he killed his victims, Ridgway would take little stones and little pebbles and insert them in the vagina of his victims.
I killed so many women, I have a hard time keeping them straight. Is that true?
Yes, it is. Staging would be something that a suspect would do subsequent to the killing to misdirect the tenor of the investigation. It worked with Simpson, and he gave us evidence, he gave it up that shows clearly he was the killer.
All right, Tom. First of all, whenever I see you, I have to shake your hand.
All right.
Thank you for all you've done in your career. Speaking as a resident of Los Angeles, an American, you're just a legend in my book. So I don't want to waste any time. You got so much knowledge, so much just storytelling ability of these crimes that you covered. And our audience is fascinated by this. By the way, Tom, episodes that you've been on in the past with Cato and I still get thousands of views a day. So let's just get into this, which is one of your main expertise. This is episode number 2 on the serial killers. And Tom, terminology, right? Because when you're covering these cases and you're leading these cases, you have to be able to communicate a certain way with your team, right? And because there has to be so much organization that's involved when you're tracking these sadistic killers, where you have to have almost a language of your own or some catchphrases or things that you work with. And you sent me some of these, and these are fascinating. I think everybody's going to find it really interesting. MO, everybody knows what that is, right? Method of operation or modus operandi.
Correct.
How important or where does that fit into things?
Well, MO is important in linking these cases. If you have a serial killer, of course, let's start with what is a serial killer? The FBI defines it in the Behavioral Science Unit. The DOJ defines it as 2 or more killings at 2 separate locations with no apparent motive. There's no connection between them, 2 or more, which is a good way to start. No apparent motive tells you a lot. Why did this happen? And again, if you have 2 or more, you're going to have more than that, 3 or 4, and then you got 5 and 6. You try to link these cases. And MO links your cases, basically.
Yep. Okay. And then signature. That's something that maybe a clue or a little piece of evidence that they leave behind?
Yeah, signature is something that you also use in linking cases. It's something that goes above and beyond the MO. It's something that is only known to the investigator and the killer. Obviously, this is something you want to keep very close to the vest. You don't want anybody to know anything about this. Let me give you a good example. A good example would be the Green River Killer. Gary Ridgway happened years ago up in the Seattle area, in the Green River. Gary Ridgway operated for probably 20 years or so, killing young women. The first 5 or 6 victims were found along the Green River area. He'd strangled and killed them after he'd picked them up earlier in different places. The MOs were similar in how he picked up his victims, how he met them, where he dumped them, this type of thing. But it went beyond that to what we call signature. For whatever reason, for the first 5 or 6 killings that were found along the river after he killed his victims, Ridgway would take little stones and little pebbles and insert them in the vagina of his victims. Kind of unusual, kind of weird. Why would he do that? We really don't know. But we know if you have 5 or 6 victims with that, what we call a signature, probably done by the same person. Highly unusual. Now, this is something you want to keep to yourselves. Obviously, you wouldn't want that out because if you ever get this individual, you're going to want to know that. You're going to want to be able to confront him with that.
Yeah.
Something like that, we would term a signature.
It's almost like they want to make their mark or want to be known for something or
something like that. And who knows what goes through their minds. It's just interesting psychological studies. Once you think you've got somebody down, knowing exactly what they're going to do, they turn around and go the other way.
Try to stay one step ahead of the people that are trying to chase these animals. We're going to get into a couple of very specific cases, famous ones that Tom was involved in. The Skid Row stabber. That was one of the first ones that he worked on, as well as the freeway killings, which was a little bit indirectly related to the toolbox killings. And we're going to connect some of those dots there. But a couple of these other phrases here, Tom, and this one leads into a great story I think you could share is posing.
Yeah.
Right. And what exactly that means, I think you can kind of figure it out. But in your term, what is that?
Well, no, posing is done after the murder occurred, and posing is done by the suspect for whatever purpose, for whatever reason is going through his muddled mind. He poses a victim, perhaps a female victim lying spread-eagled, maybe a victim with a stone on her head or upside or face down. It's a predetermined positioning of the body after death for whatever reason this particular suspect had in mind.
Sure. And
So-
that's serial killers or sometimes non-serial killers as well, right?
Yeah, that, and not all serial killers are going to pose. But again, these are some screwed up people, okay? You don't know what's going through their mind and why they would pose in a particular fashion. They may cross their legs, again.
Sure.
You don't know why they're doing it, but this is what we use, and again, for linking cases if they're posing. Not all of them are posing.
Right. And posing came into play. I'd never heard of this murder. And in LA, when you worked as long as you did, you've seen so much, you can't even believe it. Especially the murder rate here has gone down. When you were working was probably way higher. In the early 90s, we're talking over 1,000 murders a year in Los Angeles. But there's sometimes, when it's in LA, there's a lot of times it can be connected to something recognizable or famous, or you just never know the connections here.
Yeah.
And one of these cases, wasn't this the early 90s? And you were telling me the story about a guy that worked for John Wayne's old studio, was basically archiving all the great memorabilia from all the films that John Wayne, one of the legendary actors of all time. So that was this guy's job.
Right.
And that led to a case for you where you came onto it and then you solved it, but it involved posing. And that helped you crack the case.
Yeah. And not only involved posing, but it involved staging, which was also a reason. There's reasoning behind all of this. Staging would be something that a suspect would do subsequent to the killing to misdirect the tenor of the investigation. In other words, send the investigators off on a wild goose chase, when in reality, this is what happened over here. If it's a staged crime scene, it's you'd be pretty assured that the suspect knows the victim and vice versa. And they staged for a reason, again, to misdirect the tenor of the investigation. This particular case, you had a little bit of posing, but more relevant was the staging. This was done, again, by someone very well known to the victim. And he was killed with one of the memorabilia handguns that John Wayne used in one of his movies. He was shot in the back of the head and left. After the body was left, the suspect cleared out all of this memorabilia from these John Wayne movies. There's something like 120 weapons.
Probably
handguns.
worth a ton of money.
Oh, yeah. And again, clothing, hats, stuff that you... But the weapons was the biggest part of this. But like I said, about 120 different weapons, rifles, handguns, and everything else. Stole his car, took his credit cards, and left. This particular case, there was no forced entry. So we got the victim in his own home, shot in the back of the head. Well, he was looking the other way. Property taken from him. Pretty obvious that the suspect and the victim knew one another. Going through the victim's property, we come across a little list from 8 persons who were involved in a so-called Wicca coven. Some people call Wicca white magic. It's probably more of a social group than anything where you're going to practice a religion of one type or the other.
But maybe attract some fringe characters.
Well, fringe characters, obviously, are people with a lot of time on their hands. There was a high priest involved at the top of this list with the name of Eris Karamalis, a Greek name. Our victim was all the way at the bottom of the list, so he wasn't one of the heavies. You look at this first. If the credit cards are gone, all these weapons are gone. You look at the posing, and then you look at the staging. When you look at the staging, you have the victim lying there supine, face up. You have him looking straight up, but behind him you have the blood of the victim in an arrow dropped in droplets
And that's your
in an arrow.
that's your folder that has like
Yeah, I
evidence from the
don't,
60s and 70s.
I don't know if we want to look at
No,
that
we
right
won't.
now.
But okay, yeah. But I'm sure you remember exactly what that photo looked. I
Yeah.
remember it after seeing it.
But
Everything.
We have the arrow pointing to a skull of a birdman. Now, what does this mean? Well, the cops are going to look at this and say, well, this may have something to do with the murder. But it's the blood of the victim. And then beneath there, we have it was a sugar beaker removed from the kitchen, and writing was poured with the sugar beaker. It says CIA rat. From the victim, blood pointing towards the bird's head. This is a staged crime scene. Right away, again, reiterate, suspect knows the victim, no doubt, no forced entry. So we're going to start with probably this witch coven. We find out where they live, and we set them up in interviews for these various people. We want to start at the top. So we start with the high priestess, this Eris Karamalis. We don't call up and make an appointment. First, we want to drop by and see what we have, maybe catch somebody a little unawares. We don't know.
Right, and that's normal for you, right? You're not just going to go straight to the house, check out their surroundings.
Yeah, we don't want people to know what's going on or what we're doing, and it doesn't hurt to go out on a limb sometimes. As I like to say, all out of the box. You have to do that type of thinking, and you're not going to get anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So we drive over to Monterey Park, and before we go into any home with not just a possible suspect, but a witness, we like to check out the neighborhood, which we did here. As we're driving in, we're going up and down the streets, and then we're going to go into the home. Well, we come across a familiar-looking car. It's the car of the victim, parked 2 blocks from the high priestess' home.
I mean, this is 35 years ago. Do you still remember that and thinking, holy crap, that's the car?
Yeah. Well, that's what you get for you stick out. You do things that there's nothing written to say you got to do this, you got to do that. You got to use a little imagination. Any witness in a case like this is also going to be a possible suspect. Now, when you got something like this, there's probably a very good reason that the victim's car is parked 2 blocks away from this individual. But we want to know what it is.
Yeah.
We don't know. Is he a suspect? Well, we're going to look at him, pretty much so. So we catch him cold. We go into the house and we have an interview with him. One thing leads to another, and we get a search warrant for his home. We impound the car.
Are you tracking him at this point too? Like, will you have surveillance on him?
We would have.
Okay.
But in this particular case, here is a person who was at home all the time, 9 to 5,
Sure.
Solid family life, supposedly, no criminal record, extremely intelligent, probably a genius IQ. He was into computers, had made a very good living doing that. And why would he do something to this individual who he knows? We're going to find out. One thing leads to another. We get the search warrant. The search warrant leads to a receipt at a local warehouse dated the day of the murders. At a warehouse not a mile from his home. We get a search warrant for the warehouse. We serve the warrant. All of the guns are there. All the John Wayne members, everything is in the warehouse. We grab everything up. Now he is a suspect. One thing leads to another. Come to find out that he has killed Kowal for just basically reasons of jealousy. Ron Kowal was a single man who did what he wanted with his life. Dated freely, came and went. This Wicca Coven thing was just a lark, not a big deal. However, our suspect, Karamalis, was old Greek, from an old Greek family. You don't go out at night. You don't drink alcohol. You don't chase women. You don't do this. You don't do that. So he killed him for jealousy. And he was convicted, and he's doing life without the possibility of parole. But that was not a serial killer. However, those MOs sometimes are employed by serial killers. In other words, the posing and the staging aspect of that. And that's one thing that you use to link to a suspect.
A rookie cop, a rookie homicide detective isn't going to, they might think, oh my God, it was a CIA informant. Oh my God,
well, that's
case closed. Let's go to DC.
Funny you should mention that.
Yeah.
Part of our deal, I had to get a hold of the CIA in Washington, and I did. And he didn't give me the time of day. We knew that was going to happen. But if you understand and you're testifying like I did in that case, first thing the defense attorney is going to ask you, Well, did you check to see if he was part of the CIA? And I said, well, yes, I did, and I documented it.
Yeah.
And of course, the CIA wouldn't give me the time of day one way or the other.
Right.
But you have to cover that base and show you that you did. And from that, the jury can easily determine it's BS.
You know, I think that's one of the most fascinating things about you being at the highest level of that game, homicide detective, is you have to get into the mind of a killer almost. As disturbing as that might be and uncomfortable, this case, this guy's a genius. And he tried, it was almost an amateur move, like sugar, CIA.
Well, and he's using his credit cards.
Yeah.
And he parks the suspect's car 2 blocks from his home. You said it's more fascinating than terrifying. If you like what you do, you're probably pretty good at it.
Mm-hmm.
We like to do things that aren't ordinary and work in these cases, and you can. But again, it's fascination. And you look at a grueling a body and all these terrible things that happen. You can't think of it that way.
Mm-hmm.
You think of it as a puzzle, and you do get into the suspect's mind if you can, and you think some weird thoughts sometimes. But later on, you think that well, this stuff happens. So you got to think like him, but it's more fascinating than anything.
Yeah. And what you've learned about the human psyche in your 50 years of doing this has got to it would blow people away because murder? Like for this guy, this Greek dude, right? To feel that jealous that this guy had a life that maybe he envied and that he would go put a bullet in the back of his head for it. The stuff that you see, it probably helped that you were a veteran, right? That you served in Vietnam. You won distinguished service there. I mean, for somebody to have any sort of preparation or experience, because not a normal person can just go do what you do and be that successful. So you had to almost train yourself to detach yourself from the carnage early on.
Well, I'll just say this. I'll say it one time. It's what I did on this job and these murder investigations was nothing compared to Vietnam. It doesn't bother me one bit. Not a bit. Vietnam was completely different and real terror.
Wow.
This is not terror to me. This is like solving a puzzle. It's fascinating.
And it's your job, you know, and people are counting on you, like the city, the families, et cetera.
And if you enjoy your job, you're going to probably get into it pretty well.
Man, if you're enjoying this, and I know everybody is, let's drop some comments. Make sure you like the channel. This book, Tom, I want to always give you a chance to promote this. I was talking to you over the past couple of years as you were working on this thing. This is my copy. I'm very excited to have this. We're going to cover this on some of the upcoming episodes as well. But just real quickly, Tom, tell everybody about the book, where they can get it, and just, you know, you and Robert Souza wrote this thing and what's in it.
Well, basically, it's an anthology. It's about 24 or so of our cases, including serial killing cases that we got into. There's a lot of side stuff in there that's interesting. There's a couple of we looked to the psychology of investigation a little bit and what should be in the mind of the investigator. Again, there's about 24 cases, and that some solved, a couple that weren't solved. There's a couple outside of our realm that had to do with a female police officer who committed murder. The case stayed open for a number of years until it was solved, not by us, by another cold case team. There's a couple of other cold cases in there. It's a little bit of everything. Robbery, organized crime, serial killing, contract, all sorts of stuff is in there. And it's just a variation of all of these cases over about maybe a 15-year period.
Yeah, if you like Tom Lange, the storyteller, it's all right here. The Dirty Business of Murder. Go to Amazon, get this book. And the chapters are snappy, which is what I love. You keep it moving. Okay, I'm going to hit a couple of these other terms, and then we're going to get into a couple of these famous serial killer cases that you worked on. Dump site.
Yeah,
that's pretty obvious what that is. But how important is that in the whole complex weaving this and solving this puzzle that you do when you work on serial killer cases?
Okay, dump site again. This is probably a victim who was snatched somewhere, kidnapped. Whether it be a young homosexual that get picked up, as happened in the Bonin case, or whether it's a prostitute killing or something like this. Again, I can allude back to the Gary Ridgway case, the Green River Killer, which is kind of interesting. His dump sites were along the Green River up out of Seattle. And that is important in linking, for one thing. There's not too many killers who use the same dump site. I mean, if you continually use the same area, you probably looking at the same suspect. He did this for a while, and then later on he started dumping in different locations because after a while anybody can probably figure out if we found 5 or 6 bodies within a half mile, maybe somebody else is looking at them, like the cops.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to figure that out. So dump site is important, and check it. You also use a dump site as a crime scene. Postmortem lividity is something that comes into play. It's where the blood in the body sinks to the lowest possible part where the body is due to the forces of gravity. If you have someone with and this begins about 1 to 2 hours after death, after the heart stops beating. If you have someone's back, there's all white and there's no blood that's settled in the areas, but all around that white spot, that means that they were killed where they are. If you have a body that's lying on its side and there's this white patch across the back, it means that they were literally dumped and they were killed elsewhere. Little things like this tend to add up, and they also go to linking. And then from linking, you go to things we already talked about, the staging possibilities, signature, things of this nature.
Your career started in 1967. That's the year I was born. You started as a detective then. And you retired in 1996, probably the most legendary law enforcement career of anyone out there. The O.J. Simpson saga was 3 years before you retired. You have all this history dealing with these serial killers, these insane murderers, all these cases. Has anyone ever asked you, did you ever see or tie in any similarities when you looked at the MO for an O.J. Simpson with what you've seen in the past with some of these killers? Not that he was a serial killer, but similarities, their thought process, what motivates them, what drives them to commit a crime like this?
Well, the first thing I would think of would be sociopath. Sociopath is someone who basically has no conscience. You add a little narcissism to that, which is common for a sociopath, and you have someone like an O.J. Simpson. When I first met him, it took me maybe 10 seconds to figure out that he is certainly a narcissist. If he's a narcissist, a true one is, and it was very obvious, he wants to be in charge. Now, am I going to have a problem with that? No. You want to be in charge, you're in charge. With Simpson, it worked because he helped me with my searches when we searched his home, and he told me that he was wearing certain clothes that obviously he wasn't. It went to the identification of a pair of shoes he was wearing that I impounded, that he said I could have because they were size 12. Well, unbeknownst to him, bloody footwear impressions at the scene were size 12. So I talked him out of those shoes. He says, yes. So I booked him as evidence. That proved through his own admission that he is size 12. That's circumstantial evidence. But if those shoes were size 10, it would be exculpatory. He might have walked otherwise. He walked anyway. But you couldn't have used that type of stuff. So that's the thing with a sociopath. It's also true with serial killers. I believe all serial killers are sociopaths to one degree or another. Now, there's something like 5 million sociopaths. I think most psychiatrists and psychologists would tell you that about 5% of the American public are sociopaths. Doesn't mean they're all serial killers.
Right.
Politicians, there's a lot of them who are sociopaths. Leaders, billionaires of business that have been in the news lately, probably a little sociopath there, a lower level sociopath, who knows? The entertainment industry all around here. There's some sociopaths in the entertainment industry. They're not all serial killers, but serial killers do have that in common, and you take that into consideration.
They have to be. I mean,
sure.
That you have to be a sociopath to do this.
There's no guilt at all in any of them. They reason in their own mind why they're doing this. The reasons vary, but they all will tell you some reason if they'll talk to you.
Yeah.
Many don't, but many have over the years opened up.
You've interviewed so many of them. Do they always try to outsmart you or think that they can stay one step ahead of you? Is that a game for them to see if they can outmaneuver Tom Lange?
Well, it's not just me. There are those who do that. The personalities vary. You can have a make serial killer. That happen, but they're still killers. You could have hardcore people who are highly intelligent. You could have a Skid Row stabber who had about a 68 IQ. You can turn around and have someone else like Ted Bundy who was at a very high IQ. They're still the same thing. They're still killers, and they kill for different reasons. They have different motivations. Who knows what goes on between the ears and their head? I mean, they're all different.
Yeah.
If you can gain their confidence, sometimes they'll open up. It just depends. Some will, some won't.
Right. And your job is then determine if that's the path to take them down or not. And that we'll get into that too.
The people talk about interrogations too. There's a difference between an interrogation and an interview. An interrogation is you're going at them. You may be banging on the desk or yelling at them or something else. Very accusatory. Usually that will not work, especially in a serial killer. So you go the interview route, which is I'm trying to glean inconsistencies, trying to get your confidence. I'm here because I got a job to do. I don't have a choice. I got these bodies here.
Right.
You got you. I got this. I got that. Could you help us out? It worked with Simpson, and he gave us evidence. He gave it up that shows clearly he was the killer. Well, all the rest is up to the jury. I'm not the jury. I'm not the judge. I'm not the media. I'm not the defense lawyers. All I can do is my job with the evidence, give it to you, and there you go. But if you can gain the confidence of these people, and sometime you can, you do it through an interview, not an interrogation, because that person will invoke and you won't get anything.
Yep. I get it. Yeah. And I could see O.J. Simpson. Hey, I'm here to help. Hey, I want to catch her too. I want to catch that killer.
That's
you know,
exactly what happened.
Yeah. Okay. So, there's a lot of serial killers in Southern California when you almost run out of names. I mean, you had the Skid Row slasher, and then you had the Skid Row stabber. And that's the one you were in. And this was this was one of the first serial killer cases that you got involved in, late 70s.
Yeah.
Right. And Skid Row in LA, well, there's homeless people everywhere in LA now, but for a long time, they were all downtown on what was called Skid Row. And you could paint the picture of that, Tom, and how you got the call, how you got involved in this, and really what Skid Row was and is.
Okay, well, Skid Row is an area of transients, basically. It's always been there. It still is. It's probably expanded a bit since the 70s. But at the time, it was the summer of 1978, and I was working Central Division, downtown Los Angeles, which encompassed Skid Row. At the time, the LAPD had 18 geographical divisions in the city. Every geographical division had a homicide unit, 2 to 6 or 8 detectives in each unit who would handle serious crimes, but that include, obviously, homicides. Skid Row, again, there was a lot of violence, a lot of fighting, a little bit of narcotics, but mostly alcohol. Mostly that was the problem with the residents of Skid Row. During the summer, we began to have murders of transients by knife. The wounds on the bodies turned out to be fairly consistent, indicating a possible same murder weapon on the victims. The MOs appeared to be similar. The victimology was similar. The victims were all killed probably within an area less than a square mile. They were killed out in the open in the evening. And again, the coroner's office during the autopsy showed that the wounds were dimensionally consistent.
How frequently were the murders going on?
Okay. Interestingly, about every 3 or 4 days, you'd have another one. On one particular day, I believe it was in August, we had 2 within 2 hours. We knew we had a suspect working in the area of Skid Row. This isn't someone who would probably come in from the outside. It was probably one of the residents of Skid Row who was familiar with the area. We had nothing to indicate this suspect until number 10. Number 10 victim was attacked in a little park on Thanksgiving Day, 1978, Thanksgiving Day, right across from Parker Center, police headquarters, in a little park on a bench.
Is Parker Center fairly close to Skid Row?
Parker Center is 5 or 6 blocks from Skid Row. Okay. But this little park is called City Hall South. Parker Center is gone. It's been razed, and there's a new Parker Center, not Parker Center, but a new police headquarters downtown. But this little park was across the street, right across the street from Parker Center.
Okay.
So the victim of Francisco Garcia was found on a bench, stabbed numerous times, pants pulled down around his ankles. So when I got there, we did a crime scene investigation. And it's a little brassy to be right across the street from police headquarters. But again, it's a holiday, so there's not a lot of people out. The ID, identification of the victim, was lying on a bench next to the body, indicating that after he was killed, and he hadn't been moved, he was killed right where he was lying, and he was kind of slumped over the side of the bench. So we knew that the suspect had no doubt gone through his pockets looking for something, a trophy. That's called a trophy. When the suspect takes something of personal value from the victim, it's a trophy. We find in the
And for
Skid
you,
Row-
that means that's out there, something to go look for.
something to look
Yeah.
for. In this particular case of the stabber, just going forward just a little bit, we found that there were 4 or 5 victims where trophies were indeed taken because we recovered them. The search warrant later on when we identified the suspect. So we know that they'd gone through, there might have been a sexual act. There was bruising on the groin area and on the penis. There was a cut of some type on this victim's penis. Pants were pulled all the way down. Now, with the stuff on the bench and the fact that he went through someone's pockets, we want to fingerprint everything. We fingerprint the bench that he's on. There's 4 benches. All 4 benches are printed. There's only one print found on all 4 benches, which is a little unusual because these are commonly used benches in an area that's commonly used. Why would there only be one print? Well, they go in and they clean up the area. It's a nice little area park that might have been wiped away, but there's only one print, and it's directly near, right next to the victim. It's a palm print, as if someone were going up against the back of the bench with their hand holding themselves up and erect while they're going through the victim's pockets, putting the stuff out. So I got a palm print. It's good for identification. But I don't have a suspect yet until back then, we didn't have a lot of the automated systems that we have today. Didn't have DNA, of course.
Of course,
Didn't
late
have a lot
70s,
of
yeah.
things. So it was a little tough to get what you wanted. If you wanted to run someone's prints, you would have to go have that person as a suspect identified and run their prints one at a time through the print section. Palm prints back then were not commonly used to identify suspects when they were booked. When you book a suspect into the LA County system back then, you basically took their 10 fingerprints. Sometimes at a crime scene, the suspect will leave a palm print. But back then, very few were palm printed. It was only usually forgers, murderers who were palm printed, and that print would go in that person's criminal package.
And in this case, you got his palm, but not really any fingers?
Correct.
Okay.
We just have a palm. So if I do identify this suspect, if I have a suspect I want to run against that palm, chances are there's about a 70% chance it won't have a palm print. I'm screwed. I may have a 10-point check.
Exactly.
But I can't do anything with it yet. I like this guy as a suspect, okay? So this is what we have. Again, this is victim number 10. So the media is all over this. I get pulled in because robbery homicide has taken over the investigations when they were 2 in one day. It's out of our hands at Central Homicide. Now it goes to the unit, the so-called big boys who handle the big cases. They have more time than we do. The geographical units that I described are very busy. They get inundated with cases. Back then, we were having 700, 800, 900 murders a year. Today, there's only like 320. The murder rate today is over 75% less than it was in the 70s. People don't realize that. There's a lot more murders back then. So robbery homicide had taken the Skid Row stabber case. I was at homicide and Central. Right after numbers 8 and 9, I get a call from the homicide special unit who took over the case. They want to put together an investigative unit. I've been working Skid Row for years. I know it pretty well. I've worked murders in Skid Row. I know the ins and outs. I could walk blindfold down the street and know where I am. So they wanted me to join this little task force. So I did. I said, well, that's great. And I'm thinking to myself, this might be my key into the big boys. I'd like to get to robbery homicide.
Yeah.
Every homicide cop wants that. Not too many make it. But if I can get through with this thing and help these guys out, solve this case, maybe they'll take me. So they brought me in on loan. So I'm interviewed, and my lieutenant at the time, Ron Lewis, who's in charge of the unit, Says, we have a task force going. This is about the second day I was there. He said, but we have a little problem. He says, we also have the Hillside Strangler case going now. Okay, where does all the attention go? Does it go to young, attractive, college-age girls getting kidnapped, brutalized, raped, and their nude bodies thrown on the hillsides of Los Angeles, or the denizens of Skid Row? Where's the attention here?
Well, Tom, I worked in the media for a long time. We know the answer.
Okay.
And it's 24/7.
Yeah.
I mean, they give it more coverage than it probably. I mean, they like to create that panic in the city, or because it means ratings. So I get it. Yeah, that's what they're doing.
So it's a Hillside Strangler, all the girls. And they said, Tom, you're going to handle the Stabler case. We're glad to have you here. We're going to give you everything we have. Good luck, but you don't have a partner right now because everybody's going to be kind of busy chasing around the Hillside Stranglers. Meanwhile, the bonding case starting to kick in. Young boys are getting snatched. Okay, so we got all this stuff going on. So I got this all by myself. I'm thinking this is good, and it might not be so good. I'm going to have, what am I going to do? How am I going to do this? The good thing is they're going to leave me alone. I get anything I want. I got my own little desk there. I've got any help that I want. If I get back up when I need it. But here's everything we have. It's all yours.
Resources.
Resource-wise. Back then, the resources weren't automated. Okay? So what am I going to do? They leave me. That's the best thing for me and for most homicide cops. Leave me the hell alone.
Yep.
If I screw up, I screwed up. I'm man enough to admit it, and I'm going to move on to phase 2. So I'm not afraid to screw up because I really want this. So
and lower profile than Hillside Strangler anyway. So
much lower profile. So this is ideal for that type of investigation. To me, I love to do crossword puzzles. It's a puzzle, and I'm going to enjoy this because I really got a challenge now. These are all in the same area. Got to be the same guy. How hard can this be? How hard can this be? It can't be hard at all. So I'm thinking, I need a game plan. What am I going to do? Number 10, Garcia was the last murder for almost 3.5 weeks. What happened to the killer? We don't have anything. I've got a section in here about that. What are you going to do? Well, one of 3 things has occurred. He split. Things are getting too hot on the street for him. He got scared off. Number 2, he's dead. Check with the coroner's office. Well, what do I check for? Number 3, he was in custody. We have number 11 happens. Jose Alvarez is number 11. 3.5 weeks after Garcia. What happened between Garcia's murder and Alvarez's murder? That's the question. Well, Alvarez is now dead. We've linked him to the murders dimensionally through the wounds, through the MO, through the area, and everything else. He's stabber victim number 11. I can link him. Filing a case is a different story, but that doesn't matter. I can link him. So I've got, now this is the first break I've had. We've got a break in the action. Why did that break happen? We know he's not dead because number 11 is here. Did he take off? No, because we got another victim. Maybe he was in prison. Maybe he was in jail and he got out. Let's check that out.
Sure.
So I call the LA Sheriffs. The LA Sheriffs is in charge of the jails, okay? I tell them what I want. They can, back then, could still do basic computer runs for what you want. I put together everything that I had on the suspect. There were like 18 different things that I put together as far as MO, location, possibilities. We had a partial description in case number 7 at the LA Library, case number 6. 3 guys have been drinking. They see one of the victims, they see the suspect run off. We got a partial description. I get that description, I use that, and I call the sheriffs. I said, I have these 18 different descriptors. Can you make up a program for me and run it and give me a kickback of people? He says, yeah, I can do it. I said, well, before I do this, can you tell me roughly between Thanksgiving Day in 78, January, I think it might have been January 11th of 79.
21, January 21st was that.
21st,
Yep.
Jose Alvarez.
Yep.
Good, okay.
Yep.
Between that time, can you tell me how many arrestees you had so I can begin? He says, yeah, let me see here. And I went, well, a little over 42,000.
Really? In LA County?
Yes, L.A. County in that few days.
Whoa.
He says, but that includes male, females. That includes,
Okay, so we can start eliminating. Mhm.
Yeah.
Age, race. Yeah.
we can kick out all the females. Okay, we can kick out all of the pornographers, perhaps. We can kick out maybe the forgers. So we start kicking out. And I get this down to several thousand. I break it down even further. I keep breaking it down by eliminating these groups. So I'm down to just a few thousand. My suspects, I've got different groups. So I break them up into, I think, initially 4 groups. In each group, there were my best suspects who satisfied some of or most of my 18 points. Location, description was a big deal.
Mhm.
I had a male black, 5'10", late 30s or mid 30s, late 30s. These types of things, I was breaking it down each time. Okay, so when I'm down to 4 groups with about 25 to 30 in each group, I'm going to run each group separately through my print people. I go to my print people and I said, it's called LA numbers. An LA number is a criminal booking number that you will have for
Right.
life if you've got a criminal career. So when you run someone's prints, you run through the LA number. So I get my print people and I say, this is what I'm doing. I'm going to send you groups of people, 25 at a time. And I want you to run these groups and see if any of them match up to this print. And I said, I understand you don't have a whole lot of palm prints in there. He says, no, it's okay. We'll do what we
Yeah.
can do. So I get the first one. It takes quite a while to put it together, 2-3 weeks. And I take it, I send everything, I bring them, walk them down. They're right below us, 1 floor below, which helps. I say, this is my first group that I'm interested in out of Skid Row. These are all people who live around Skid Row, have had records in Skid Row, have used knives. They're all inclusive of what I believe to be a suspect. Would you run all of their prints? They do. It takes a while.
Sure.
They come back and say, 0, nothing.
Okay.
All right, thanks. Okay. So I'm working on group 2. I put group 2 together. I take it down there. And one thing leads to another. And they run the prints. And they come back, group 2, nothing. And I said, I know you guys don't have a lot of palm prints, but you were in this business. When you talk to people, you know when they're kind of holding off on you or holding back on you. Something wasn't right with the guy I was talking to on the phone in Prince.
Regarding
said,
group 2?
Yes.
Yeah.
I said, now, when I requested these prints, I didn't talk to you. I talked to your supervisor. I want the 10-finger runs. Sure, that's fine. Well, I'll do it. But I'm interested more in a palm print. The palm print is the only print that I have. Did you run the palm print? And there was a hesitation. Yeah, I ran a palm print. And no way. I said, okay. I say, fine, we hang up. I go to my lieutenant. I said, I bring him up there. This is what I have. I got this second group. Really looks good. I got this one guy who was arrested at 3rd and Main, right in the middle of all the killings, with a knife, standing down over a transient who was drunk and passed out. They booked him
What'd they book him for?
possession of the knife
Okay.
to some extent, and they booked the knife. Okay, so one thing leads to another. I have the knife. Turns out the knife is dimensionally consistent. They're not going to say this is the knife of any. It's dimensionally consistent, highly circumstantial, but it's good. They didn't say it couldn't be the knife.
Yeah.
So that leads me there. And then the background of the suspect is very interesting. His former life, he's got a criminal record of
Right.
these types of things. He's got a very low IQ.
Had moved to LA recently.
He'd been to L.A.
Yeah.
He'd been to prison in Tennessee
Yep.
For a number of years for robbery.
No palm print on the knife.
Nothing on the knife.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm still interested in this guy. So I'm telling this to my lieutenant. He says, fine, go with him. We're a little busy with a hillside.
Yeah.
If you get something, let me know. We'll see what we can do. So I go back in my office, and no sooner there, the phone rings. And it's the supervisor who I initially talked to. He said, yeah, you ran Maxwell. I said, yeah. He says, well, I got to make. He says, you got to make? I said, yeah. Well, the guy said he didn't. I said, well, he checked again. And I said, yeah, you sure? Yeah, the make at number 10 Garcia, it's Maxwell. So I'm thinking, I can't believe we found this guy. This is him. One thing leads to another. We do search warrants, okay? We find out that Maxwell was indeed arrested. That's where I got his name from initially. He was arrested as a lookout in MacArthur Park, downtown L.A., for a sexual assault that was going on inside the restroom. Central Vice arrested him. It was a vice arrest after this knife arrest. The knife arrest was before. During when he was gone, when he was out running around loose, he was arrested for this Pershing Square arrest. That's what kept him for several days. 2 days after he was released, Alvarez was murdered. It fits. So I said, I wonder where he is now. Well, he's in jail. He's going to get out, I think it was the following Monday, for that particular offense. So he says, that's good. We're going to have somebody waiting for him. Surveillance. I put surveillance. So I tell the lieutenant, he's all happy. He says, this is great. All of a sudden, I got 10 more guys working with me. We put together 5 teams. First thing is surveillance. We want to surveil him and see where he goes. Because I want to do more search warrants. I want to see where he gets patted down at night, where he lives, what he does for 2 or 3 days. We obviously don't want him killing anybody, so surveillance knows that. They're pretty well trained.
Yeah.
They're very well trained. If he's going to threaten somebody, they're going to nail him, okay? But meanwhile, we need intelligence. We need to know what this guy has been doing, where he lives, and everything else, because there have been trophies taken. I like to find some of those trophies. I like to find the knives. I like to find a lot of stuff. Maxwell is released. Surveillance is on him. They follow him for 2-3 days. During those 2 or 3 days, he goes by virtually every crime scene. He's engaging with other transients. He's bumming cigarettes. He's getting in arguments sometimes. He fits with the library bunch. We've had 2 or 3 serial killings at the library, and not just the stabber, but earlier the slasher was also at the public library. It's a large transient area. It was, I don't think it is now. Putting all these things together, they pat him down at 2 different locations in South L.A. It turns out he has 2 sisters, and those 2 locations where he slept on 2 different nights are his sisters' locations. Get search warrants for those locations. We follow him for, like I said, almost 3 days. We put everything together. I have teams going to hit both houses at the same time, and we have patted down Maxwell late one afternoon in a downtown movie theater. I said, I'm going to arrest him myself. I said, we don't want to go charging in here. Put the lights on. You get, please, leave hands, all this. You don't do that.
Right.
That's in the movies. We're not going to do that. But I'm going to have a lot of backup because half a dozen of you guys are going to go in there and you're going to sit all around Maxwell because he's sitting in like the 3rd or the 4th row, 2 seats in. I want everybody seated around him in case this goes south.
So this is happening in real time. You know he's at the theater.
Yeah.
You get your crew together and you come up with a plan.
And the plan
and were you
is-
guys were you undercover? Like, were you looking like you could be transients or
these are
something?
transient
Yeah,
guys. You
yeah.
can't tell the transients
Yeah.
from the cops.
Okay.
But they went into the movie theater and they're sitting all around Maxwell. I'm going to sit down next to him. I'm going to have my gun in my hand. If he brings out a knife, I'm going to shoot him. It's as simple as that. Because I have every right to do that, and I know he's killed at least 11 people. God knows how many others he may have killed. He's a psychopath.
Yeah.
Okay? But I think there's another way around this. We briefly touched on this earlier. I'm not going to yell at him. I'm not going to get upset. I'm going to be very clear with him. For someone with an IQ of 68, 1 and 1 is 2, 2 and 2 is 4.
Sure.
Not going to hurt you, this type of thing. So my plan is to go in. I'm going to sit right next to him with my 2-inch right here. I'm going to say, Bobby Joe. Well, I get one of these. I said, my name's Tom. I'm a cop. And I've got a gun right here.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't do exactly as I tell you, I am going to shoot you. Yeah. Do you understand? Oh, Bobby Joe, listen to me. Do you understand? This is serious.
Yeah.
You see my gun. Keep your hands where I can see them. Okay. stand up and keep your hands in front of you. Hear what I said? Now the guy's all around hearing exactly what's going on. So he stands up. So soon he gets his hand behind him, the guy behind him grabs him and cuffs him up. It's all over.
Okay.
That's how you work this particular guy because he has got a low IQ
Right.
anyway. I don't want him pulling out a knife because I would have shot him. I didn't have a choice.
Mm-hmm.
But it was better doing that than causing a problem like they do on these TV
Yeah.
shows.
Well, it was more dramatic too. That's unbelievable. By the way, do you remember the movie when he was watching?
Don't
tell me it was a John Wayne movie.
I think you know the answer to that.
Okay.
White Buffalo. White Buffalo, I believe, was a movie.
Okay.
Now, White Buffalo is the last name of victim number 9, Jimmy White Buffalo.
Coincidence? Amazing. Did he have a knife on him?
No,
Okay.
there was no knife on his person. Search warrants. We recovered 2 knives. Later, we find they are dimensionally consistent. There's no hair on them. There's no blood on anything else. They are dimensionally consistent with the wounds in most of the victims. 2 knives. We get 4 different trophies. One is for victim Reed. I think it was number 7. Fascinating. It was a coin. You know, today people collect coins for different reasons. The coin swaps and everything
Mhm.
else. I've got a big coin collection of commemorative coins and this and everything. This coin is from the Old Cease Sheep Herd Ranch in Bakersfield, California in the 1930s. A very rare coin from the 1930s that Reed had on his person when he was murdered. The reason we know that is 1 week before Reed was murdered, he was arrested by the Santa Monica Police Department, who booked him for drunk, and they booked this Old Cease Sheep coin into his personal property. When they released him in Santa Monica, they gave him his property back. When his body is found behind a bar that Maxwell had been seen in drag just before the murders, he doesn't have the coin. Where do we find the coin?
Sisters.
Not
Okay.
in his pocket.
Okay. Boom.
So, okay,
Wow.
we found 3 other pieces through the ring. There was a ring, there was a cigarette lighter, and something else from Garcia. So these are trophies, okay? We find that he has been going to the public library and checking out books on witchcraft. 2 or 3 of the victims have what could be described as pentagrams, which may be signatures on a couple of the victims. One of them has a sign that says, "I kill winos," or something to that extent. That was in a wall in the Greyhound bus depot. Little things like this are coming together. It's enough to put a case together, the way I see it. So we do. We put all these things together. One thing leads to another. This goes on for a number of years. We file 11 murder counts. We finally get to trial. We go back and do a lot of background on him. We find out that when he was at Pillow State Prison in Tennessee for robbery, he would dress in drag. And apparently they didn't have a problem with that back there because he would dress in drag.
Yeah.
I had a murder of a woman during the middle of all of these stabber victims in the same area at Schaefer's Cafe in Broadway in downtown LA, an elderly woman who frequented this restaurant, went downstairs in this restroom of Schaefer's Cafeteria to go to the bathroom. She didn't return. Her stabbed body was found down there. Money was taken from her, shoved behind a commode. That's the one case that has always stayed with me. I wrote that up in here.
Sure.
Because she was an elderly woman by herself. Maxwell was available for that case. This is a woman, though, not a transient. But he dresses in drag. This was in a woman's restaurant. Did he approach her? He was available. Did he approach her, and was he the killer? I don't know.
Wow.
We could not put that case on him to this day. It's unsolved. Little things you have time
Sure.
to develop before trial. And so we built the case with all of this evidence against Maxwell, much of it circumstantial. A serial killing case, if you have 2 or 3 cases, in any case, 2 or 3 pieces of circumstantial evidence, it's so what?
Yeah.
This could have happened. When you have 15 or 20 pieces of circumstantial evidence, you begin to build a case. And that's what was happening with Simpson. And there was certainly plenty to file. So we filed that case. And this went on for a number of years, as many serial killing cases do. He was eventually convicted of 2 of the murders. Why only 2 of 11? Well, all of them were solved, but the jury is given instructions. The jury realized if you convict someone of murder, first-degree murder under these circumstances, 2 is the same as 20.
Mm-hmm.
Same sentence.
Lock them up.
Same sentence.
Exactly. Go with the evidence you got.
Yeah, there was a witness who testified it was a jailhouse informant who you never want to use.
Right.
However, we could corroborate some of what he said. He was in Maxwell at the same time in the same jail cell. And Maxwell, he said, copped out to him. Whether he did or not, I don't know. The prosecutor decided to use him. The jury discounted him because he was a jailhouse informant, but they still used him. But because of that, this went to the California appellate courts, who said, well, because you used him, it's got to be retried. The district attorney says, no. They took it to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court didn't take the case, but they weighed in on it. One Supreme Court justice said it should be retried. 2 said, no, the conviction stands. Well, they didn't take the case.
Yeah.
So if one justice says that, then you have to retry. They're going to retry it. He remains in custody. 8 years passed of discovery and everything else. Maxwell ends up with a heart attack. He ends up in the hospital. He's on life support. He's got weeks or months to live. The prosecutor has to make a decision. What are we going to do? They want him released because it makes us look good, I guess, or whatever else. But if he dies, we'll release it. We'll drop charges. But if he doesn't die, this is with prejudice. We will refile these cases. So everybody says, all right, fine. So they say he's released on compassionate release. It looks good for everybody that this poor man who's out of it is going to die, but he's going to die knowing he's been released from his charges.
Only in California, Tom.
Only in California.
Only in Southern California.
He dies. You can't try a dead man for murder.
Yeah.
Case over. But he was never acquitted.
Yeah.
That's what people get
Exactly.
it wrong.
And that's the frustrating thing for someone like you that does your job by the book. You do the dirty work. You find the killer. You bring him to justice, and then it's out of your hands. And that's just things. But that's a perfect example of putting the pieces together. Well, that's it for today's story, but there's so much more to come. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a shocking case.